with the usual attendance and apologies for absence. Chief, do you have any?
Commissioner, Julie and Simon are both otherwise committed this morning, but otherwise you've got myself, Paul, Nick and Peter. And in fairness, Julie's obviously recuperating, having just come out of hospital, and Simon has got commitments, I think, with Suffolk Command Team today.
Thank you very much. And from the OPCCN, Mark?
Yes, Commissioner, Gavin Thompson sends his apologies. He's got a double book and a private appointment this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. We go on to declarations of personal and or prejudicial interests. Anything or nothing?
Nothing from the Constabulary, Commissioner.
No, okay, thank you. We come now to the minutes of the last meeting to confirm them. Sharon, are there any actions you want to bring to our attention?
Yes, Commissioner, page 4, action number 54. That's a carryover from last time regarding Operation Solve, and that relates to conducting a survey of 101 service users.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything further you want to say with that, Chief, or is it perhaps a bit premature?
Commissioner, it's a little bit premature, and we're still looking at the broader issue of 101. So we've now got 2 sets of surveys up and running. We've got the perception survey, which is 4,000 people on a rolling 12-month basis. We're then doing a survey of people that are users of the Solve service, and we're then looking at the broader 101 customers as well. But in the overall scale of the number of people surveyed, we're surveying more people now than we ever have done before. And you would have seen from the reports that you've got, the numbers of people that are being surveyed within the perception survey far outweighs any numbers that we will get through the crime survey of England and Wales. And you'll know that that survey is currently being suspended because of COVID. But actually, we've shared with you the most recent perception survey data, and you know just how pleased I am with what that is telling us.
For the online reporting service that we are now running, how's that going? Is there increasing use made of the online reporting service?
Commissioner, I don't have the figures on a rolling basis, but what I do know is that more and more crime is being reported through our online services, and we are having more contact with customers in our community through our online facility.
And the public can expect the same high quality level of quick response as they would normally expect by speaking to somebody on 101?
You know, those inboxes are being monitored all the time, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other actions, Sharon?
Yes, Commissioner, one more action. It's on page 8, action number 58. That's a Power BI presentation to be given to yourself regarding the management of domestic abuse, rape and serious sexual offences, and then a paper to be brought to a future Police Accountability Forum for community reassurance.
Well, I had an excellent presentation this morning, thanks to the deputy and his really very impressive staff in this area. We have recently increased resources dedicated to this through the digital investigators, and because of the precept increase, the Norfolk community is allowing us to still further increase the number of digital investigators. Increasingly online investigation is important to all levels of crime, but certainly in the case of rape and sexual violence crime. And I was satisfied this morning at the best efforts being made by a very impressive team to address these matters sympathetically and in exchange with the Crown Prosecution Service, ensuring that we get as quick and effective and thorough justice as victims, defendants, and witnesses and the police deserve. Because as we all know, justice delayed is justice denied. So thank you for that opportunity that was given to me this morning.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Anything else, Sharon?
Commissioner, that completes the actions from the last PAF.
Okay, well, we'll take it that the minutes from the last meeting are confirmed. And we go to agenda item 4, which is turning to a police and crime plan theme, good stewardship of taxpayers' money. Who's going to speak to that?
Peter, please.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Commissioner, the budget report is set out with the papers and I'll cover the highlights of the report. The report is based on the period to the end of December, forecasting to the end of the financial year. Constabulary is reporting an underspend of 175,000 on revenue, which is less than 1% of the budget, and reporting slippage of nearly 10.9 million on the capital programme. The report presented this month is very similar to that of last month, so there isn't too much to highlight, but a couple of things to note. The level of recruitment for officers is still on track to be 35 FTE over establishment by year end. This is to ensure that we can bridge the recruitment pause required for 3 months as we move from our old learning programme to the new police constable degree apprenticeship with Anglia Ruskin University as our partner. The forecast spending on transport and supplies and services is very similar to that reported at last PAF, so nothing to highlight of note there. Paragraph 2.9 outlines the additional contribution to the capital programme made possible in the main due to the in-year savings review. This will help protect reserves by the equivalent amount and is a prudent course of action. The sections on income and savings, again, very similar to the last PAF, so nothing additional to highlight this month. And finally, section 5 outlines the capital programme position. As outlined, the slippage is 10.9 million. Again, not too much change since the last report to PAF, and that's predominantly due to the review of the Broadland Police Station and the slippage of that scheme into the financial year 21-22. So quick run through this month. It's very similar to last month, Commissioner, but happy to take any questions on that report before I move to the estates paper.
Well, how many companies in this country wouldn't be envious of a £190 million budget that can come in at £175,000 underspend? So that's to the tremendous credit of the constabulary, to you and your team, Peter. And of course, some of this is incident related. If you have a really lengthy investigation, so on, it can start eating up the cash, can't it? But I must say, by all accounts, this is a really impressive turnout. So thank you to you and your staff and to the constabulary for that, because that really is best use of taxpayers' resources. Going forward, you have major expenditures coming up. You're refurbishing the Heatherset School into a Centre of Excellence for Training, and you are looking to build a new Eastern hub at Broadland Gate, which will be a major expenditure of several £1 million. My understanding is your intent is to rely on borrowing to cover that cost. The Chancellor a few weeks ago expressed some concern, suggestions that interest rates could start to go up again. How have you factored that in, the possibility of increased interest on the money you borrow to build Broadland Gate?
So in terms of the medium-term financial plan, Commissioner, we've made some assumptions about the levels of borrowing that we have to undertake and the rates that we would borrow at, and so they are written fully into the plan going forward. Obviously, as the Chief's CFO, in conjunction with your CFO, Jill Penn, Lorne, we discussed the timing and the rates of borrowing that we would target. At the moment, the short-term rates are very low, so we're accessing the normal money markets for the current period, and we'll set a target rate in conjunction with our Treasury Management advisors and in discussions between myself and Jill, and we would look to borrow long at the right time at the right rate, and therefore that would de-risk us from rates increasing any further during the course of time.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to carry on to estate strategy now?
More than happy to do that, Commissioner. So the estates paper is also included. Again, similar to that presented at the last PAF, a couple of things to pick up. So Holt building works are now completed. We'll be looking to switch over to the shared premises with fire around that April and May time, dependent on COVID restrictions, because the old building is still providing us with some additional capacity while COVID secure arrangements are having to be maintained. We have 3 properties or 3 pieces of the estate that are up for sale at the moment at North Lynn, Tuxwood and Stalham. We're expecting offers back in by the 23rd of April for North Lynn and Tuxwood, and that we've had some offers in for Stalham, but they were lower than we had hoped for, so we'll be going back out for with that element again. You've already referred to Heatherset. That site is developing well into the new professional development centre, and we will shortly be coming to yourself, Commissioner, with an outline proposal for the whole of the Year 2 budget in line with the business case that was presented to you this time last year. So some really good progress in the time that we've owned that site and got that up and running. Nothing further to cover, Commissioner, but happy for further questions.
Well, that's a fantastic facility you have at Heatherset. Some of us had the opportunity to visit it last week, and I really have to single out Mr. Philpott. What's his name? Keith
Philpott, yes.
Keith Philpott. The enthusiasm and the commitment that he shows there is really something to behold and to hear. That is a fantastic facility, and a facility that offers the prospect increasingly to share with the wider community, does it not? And are you looking at those opportunities?
Yes, we are looking at those opportunities to share with other partners in the community, and certainly explore all of those. So
really that's given a new life to that facility and by extension to the local community, hasn't it?
It has. In line with the business case, it was always the intention to involve the community with that site and other partners as well. So that's what we're looking to achieve through the project.
And you're up and running in Swaffham now with the Western Investigative Hub. How are you progressing with regard to Broadland Gate? Where are you at in developing that site?
So we've bought the land at Broadland, the Broadland site. We've had planning permission granted. We're currently reviewing the tenders for construction that are coming in. We've been giving you some early briefings around that, Commissioner, but that is now coming to a point where we will be discussing a decision with you in terms of granting that tender award for the construction of the site and moving forward with the project. So that's lined up in the next couple of weeks. Okay,
thank you very much. I think you have a third part of your presentation, haven't you?
Commissioner, from pages 29 to 33, which is under this heading, could I ask Paul to brief you, please, on that's in relation to answering calls, emergency calls, answering 101, and then perception surveys and our survey data?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanford.
Good morning, Commissioner. So just the highlights from the report. I'll probably take you to page 30 first of all, which shows the number of 999 calls received by the constabulary over the last 5 years. You will note that despite the restrictions that the country has been in for most of the last 12 months, the volume of 999 calls has barely dropped below the number that we were receiving the year before. In some of the months when we were in the deepest lockdown, we saw more of a reduction, but it's fair to say that from a planning perspective, as the constabulary moves into the summer and what we believe will be an easing of the restrictions, we are anticipating a significant jump in demand into the control room once we add on the impact that particularly the hospitality industry has on calls for service on Friday and Saturday nights. For that reason, you will know that an area where we asked for your support with Precept was to make further investments in our control room so that we can keep on top of that demand, and recruitment for those posts is underway. You'll note from the metrics that, again, despite navigating the challenges of the lockdown, We, in the last 12 months, reached 89.8% of emergencies within target times. That's slightly above the long-term average. And 91% of 999 calls were answered within 10 seconds, which is above the 90% target and above our long-term average. So we are pleased with that performance, but cautious about what the summer will bring for us as the country unlocks. We're aware that both your office and ourselves have considerable contact about the 101 service. In the last 12 months, our average time to answer 101 calls was 4 minutes and 49 seconds. Important to recall that that is a non-emergency number, and 4 minutes 49 seconds seems appropriate. Of course, what we understand is that's an average, and at times, particularly peak times, 5 to 7 p.m, we can see longer waits for 101. And through increasing the number of digital options, as we referenced earlier, and again through additional resource, we are hoping to be able to keep on top of the increase in 101 demand that we are again anticipating in the summer ahead. Moving on to the perception survey, which the Chief Constable alluded to. We assessed the percentage of the public that believe the police are doing a good or excellent job. That's Crime Survey of England and Wales, and that shows 63.3% think of the public think that we meet that category, which places us joint 7th nationally. Throughout your tenure, we've always been in the top 10 forces nationally for confidence. But what we're certainly starting to see is a reduction in the sample size of the Crime Survey's survey, and to therefore get a better understanding of public perceptions, we are now doing our own survey, as referenced by the Chief earlier, with 4,000 respondents. The headlines from that make very pleasing reading. So from our perception survey, 88% of respondents think that the police are doing a good or excellent job. And there's a number of other indicators that are at the very end of the report for you to digest. So I think they're the main headlines. Should you have any questions, Commissioner?
Well, thank you very much. And you've given some impressive statistics with regard to answering calls, both 999 and 101. You haven't said quite so much about response times. Can you tell me what the expected response times are with regard to 999, both in the more built-up areas of the county and the more rural areas?
Yes, of course. We have a different response time for urban as opposed to rural areas. Within urban areas, we have a response time of 10 minutes, where we aim to get to our calls. That is referenced into percentage emergencies in target measure at the top of your sheet. And in rural areas, that extends out to 15 minutes, given the challenges of 15 minutes urban, 20 minutes rural, given the challenge of the road network.
Okay, thank you. And for 101 calls, do you have any sort of touchstones there with respect to response?
Well, 101 calls come in all manners of shapes and forms, Commissioner. Some of them are intercepted and put straight into a 999 queue, given the nature of the emergency, and some of them are dealt with by appointment. Some of them are referred on to other agencies. So it really does depend on the nature of the call.
Okay. Do you get a number of calls reporting on alleged violations of lockdown rules? And how do you deal with those?
We do get a number of calls. It fluctuates as new announcements are made by the government. I think at peak, it's been about 3% of the volume of calls that we have received. They are all triaged, assessed against the other priorities that come into the control room at the time. And we certainly deploy to what appear to be the most flagrant breaches of the lockdown rules. And you would have seen through the weekly information that I send through to you that we have been recently quite strong on enforcement of breaches of the regulations.
Do you expect it's going to get increasingly complicated as the rules are relaxed? Because I've heard you say before that, and the chief as well, that ultimately you have to rely on the professional judgment of police officers in particular cases. But as the rules become relaxed, is that going to be more challenging for the constabulary?
I think so. Lockdown is certainly a lot more clear cut than the tiering system that we had pre-lockdown and the roadmap that we're moving into post-lockdown. And what we've also seen is the public often move early. So where an announcement is made for a particular date, sometimes the public will change their position, their behaviour ahead of that. I think the 29th of March is the next key date for us. We keep a really close eye on what our enforcement posture is, and we will leading up to that date.
Okay. Mr. Davison, is there anything you can tell us about the unfortunate events in Great Yarmouth over the weekend?
Yes, Commissioner, just bear with me, please, whilst I just sort out my screen, if you'd be so kind. Okay, so Commissioner, we had some events over the weekend in Great Yarmouth, as you'll be aware, where we had a large gathering on both the Saturday and on the Sunday in respect to young people who came together, it's reported in the public, in respect to seeking to remember and hold a vigil in respect to a young man who sadly died in a road traffic collision last week in the North Drive area of Great Yarmouth. We'd certainly been made aware of the potential for that gathering in some calls that came into the constabulary on the Friday, and we sought to engage with the individuals that had reported the potential for the gatherings in terms of trying to encourage them to think about that in the context of the lockdown, and to encourage them not to organise that or facilitate it, or actually that to take place in terms of any influence they had. We were sadly met with resistance and a non-willingness to engage in respect to those individuals that we had identified, but we sought to encourage them to try not to do that and to communicate as such. We anticipated from that call that there was going to be an event in St George's Park at 8 p.m. on the Saturday, and that there would be an event at 2 p.m. on North Drive in terms of a gathering on the Sunday. That's the information that we had, and we were working with that, trying to encourage people to comply with the lockdown and the regulations about gatherings. But as I said, we weren't particularly well supported in terms of our outreach to the individuals that talked about that. So what actually did in fact happen is we came across an event on the Saturday, which was not at St George's Park as been announced. We were starting to receive calls from the public in respect to 100+ individuals gathering on North Drive, and the calls from the public were talking about the size of the gathering, the group, and the behaviour of the gathering and the group and individuals within that. Police responded to that, came across the gathering, and in line with the National Police Chief Council's guidance, we sought to use the 4E approach in terms of encouraging, explaining and engaging with individuals to try and get them to leave the area, not form that gathering in respect to complying with current coronavirus restrictions that we're all dealing with. That was unsuccessful in terms of being able to encourage and engage individuals to do that. The nature of the gathering then started to change in terms of some of the behaviours from some of the individuals within the group, not all by any stretch of the imagination, but we started to receive calls in terms of some antisocial behaviour, some bottles being thrown, some cans being thrown,
indications of some low-level drug taking, and also some scuffles amongst individuals from within the group. And as a consequence, we started to see the nature of that gathering change, and music was being played. That then started to see the commander on the night start to think about what broad range of legislation the commander had at his disposal in terms of being able to bring that gathering to a conclusion. And some of the behaviours, the music, the fact that it was his night, the calls that we were getting from members of the public in terms of antisocial behaviour and disruption to them, started to see aspects of it turn into behaviour that actually we normally associate with either an unlicensed music event or actually in fact direct rave legislation. So it wasn't a rave in terms of its inception and what the intention was at the very beginning of it. It was clearly linked into the sad death of this young man, but some of the behaviour started to see it change in its nature and dynamics, and the commander used legislation under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act that we normally associate with raves and managing raves to be able to use powers to issue an order for people to leave. And having done so, we then started to see compliance, and the group dissipated. So that was unknown to us in terms of that gathering on the Saturday night, and we had to use resources from across the county to be able to deal with that and bring it to a conclusion. So those were the events on Saturday. That obviously as a consequence saw us think about what we needed to do in respect to Sunday, in terms of will there or will there not be the event taking place as was reported to us towards the end of the week. And we put on a policing operation and a command structure to ensure that we had a strong policing presence to be able to deal with any eventualities that we would be faced with. As it happened, there was a gathering roughly at around about 2 o'clock, as was anticipated. We saw a large number of motorcyclists and moped riders in the first instance coming together, and quite frankly, the nature of the driving was dangerous, appalling and antisocial, sadly. And we had to undertake some road closures in order to be able to reduce the risk to members of the public and to the motorcyclists themselves, actually, in terms of some of the driving behaviours that we were observing and seeing. We had about an hour where it was quite problematic, but after some road closures and some interventions, that element of the gathering stopped. But we still had an individual sort of crowd of around about 100 to 150 individuals that were on North Drive, and we sought to again encourage and explain and ask those individuals to respect and follow the current law and legislation in respect to the lockdown and not having gatherings of that size and nature. And that took some time to do that, but by about 6-7 o'clock in the evening, we got a situation whereby the vast majority of those individuals had in fact dissipated, and you know, we were seeing much more better compliance in terms of the landscape in Great Yarmouth. And then by 11 o'clock at night, we stood down the police response to the operation in terms of we'd seen Yarmouth turn to normality. There were a number of arrests in terms of public order offences, and we did issue a number of fixed penalty notices to those individuals that were eligible for that in terms of them being adults over the age of 18, because of course you can't issue those FPNs to children in terms of the regulations.
Well, thank you. It sounds like this was a test successfully met of the policing model, where we can't expect to have police in numbers everywhere across this big county, but where needs must, you have the capacity, intelligence-driven, the base of intelligence-driven information to reinforce quickly as required. And you're saying that was successfully implemented in Great Yarmouth on the weekend.
Yes, Commissioner, we have tried and tested mechanisms whereby we can you know, divert resources from across the county that are on duty. We can bring resources that are off duty on duty if that's appropriate. Of course, that comes at a cost in terms of payment to those staff that are off duty. Also, we've got a regional network whereby we can call upon, if necessary, support from other police force areas in terms of their on-duty resources. And then there is a national framework whereby all 43 forces can actually provide mutual aid to one another, depending on what's going on in a particular force area. But of course, we never normally activate that unless there's a really big, significant incident that requires a national response to be able to support a local police force. So there's a well tried and tested mechanism being in existence to be able to achieve that.
So I'd like to think that gives some assurance to the wider Norfolk community that the resources are there for them as required in particular instances. We don't keep a standing army of police in our county. Thank you for that. Shall we move on to the next agenda item then, which is a verbal update on COVID. We've had quite a nice lead in on COVID now.
Commissioner, look, I'll only cover what I would describe as the headline points. Sickness across the constabulary currently sits about 3.6%, which is incredible. Infection rates within the organisation have been broadly representative of transmission within our communities. We've only had a couple of cases in the last couple of weeks. The organisation is still obviously now coming to terms with the different phases as we move out of lockdown. So we're in the process of preparing for that and planning for key events during the course of the next 4 months. And that planning is all being led by Julie and Nathan Clark. You will have seen what the current rates look like across the county. They're getting better pretty much week by week, which is good news. The constabulary had its biggest or toughest weekend before last, when we had that glorious weekend of weather with breaches. And we dealt with numerous people that had travelled significant distances to come to the coast and dealt with it quite appropriately. Briefed local MPs, briefed the Lord Lieutenant, and we've ensured that as we've gone through the pandemic, we've kept key stakeholders regularly engaged and updated on our response. We have retained their support, their confidence, our community support and confidence throughout. And again, I think last night the question around why are you dealing with people on windswept beaches, I was able to deal with a lot of evidence around the response that the constabulary has delivered. So we're now, I think the Daily Mail headline this morning is day number 351, so it's going to be 352 tomorrow of lockdown. The constabulary, I think, has equipped itself exceptionally in unprecedented times. We have worked as a team. We've worked with our partners, we've worked with the community, we've retained community confidence, we have retained our legitimacy in the eyes of our communities, and that's for me is the most critical thing. And frankly, I think we've excelled. So I'm quite happy to go into finer detail if you wish, but actually you're well briefed on what we've done. You're well briefed upon the approach that we have taken throughout. And I think the community's response to what we've done really says it all. Thank you.
Is anybody equipped to say something about the age profile of the Norfolk police officers? The largest single group of police officers is in what age category? 25 to 40 or what?
Paul, do you know the answer to that question?
So I know the direction we're heading in. I know that in 4 years' time, a quarter of our workforce will have less than 3 years service. So now I met a new group of student officers yesterday, and the youngest was 19 and the oldest was 49. So it's easier, but the vast majority are going to be in that 20 to 35 bracket, I would say, Commissioner, and certainly of those doing frontline roles, the uniform officers who are probably most at risk of transmission of COVID are most likely to be in that younger bracket, I would suggest.
Are you familiar with the timetable for a vaccine rollout when that age group would finally get the jab?
Commissioner, I'm not sure. Actually, when you look at, forgive me, I didn't tell you, I think we've now had over 700 colleagues have now been vaccinated. So what we have seen is surgeries across the county at the end of the day, identifying to the control room the opportunity for vaccines to be administered. We've been taking that opportunity at every single occasion that we can. And yesterday, Nick briefed me that I think it's over 700 now. So it's a good chunk of the organisation has already been done. And when you look at the, if you like, that the approach that's been done in phases, I think for a lot of surgeries here, that phasing has not been an issue. And I know within my local area that that people as young as 20 are being called in to have their jabs. So 700 plus have been vaccinated already. The strategic direction of travel is a positive one. I'm disappointed, you know, that we weren't highlighted and fast tracked as frontline workers, and we need to protect ourselves. Unfortunately, we've lost that argument, but actually the numbers are encouraging in terms of the percentage that are being vaccinated.
So one could characterize this as a missed opportunity by the government to show its support for policing by pushing them up to the top, pushing police up to the top of the priority list for jabs.
Yeah, look, you could, and I think we should have been pushed up, and I think it should have been police officers and teachers. But look, we've lost that argument. I am reassured though about the numbers that are getting vaccinated, and it is encouraging, and that's police officers, police staff, it's members of the Special Constabulary as well. So whilst government might not have been supportive, it certainly feels and seems to me that actually our local commissioners, our GP surgeries have been supportive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to the next agenda item, which is to increase visible policing?
Yes, could I ask Paul to talk to item 6, please, Commissioner?
Okay, Commissioner, I will. You've seen the report, so I will just summarise. We know that throughout your.
I have, but the public haven't, and
no. So
I have, but I'm mindful the public may not have, and I'm always mindful that these meetings are for public dissemination.
Likewise, Commissioner. So throughout your time in role, we've seen an increase in the number of police officers on the beat, and equally sought to ensure that they've got the right tools to work in the modern policing environment that they find themselves in now, whether that be body-worn cameras, mobile devices, drone technology. We've certainly improved the technology that they have at their fingertips. The report that was that accompanies this meeting provided a brief outline of our plans for visibility next year, and utilising the precept funding that you secured for us. So, firstly, on precept, as a result of the decision that you made, we will be recruiting an additional 24 police officers on top of the allocation provided to us by the National Uplift Programme of 66. We will be additionally investing in the contact and control room, so that those police officers are deployed to the jobs as required and at speed as required by the public, and to deal with that increase in 999 and 101 calls that I referred to earlier on during the meeting. Visual policing needs an effective control room behind it to get those officers to the place where their visibility is required. So that that investment is essential. And to help make best use of the control room's time, we're also investing in a live chat pilot to see if there's an alternative means of the public getting in contact with us. Again, with precept money, we're investing in additional neighbourhood problem solving skills. You've said before that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, so we are investing in additional staff trained in enhanced problem solving skills to get to the root of neighbourhood problems. We will be deploying a new dedicated team of officers who will be carrying out high visibility patrols in communities, targeting hotspot locations, dealing with neighbourhood issues as they arise. And that's on the back of a small pilot that we ran in Chapelfield Shopping Centre pre-COVID. We're now at the stage where we're looking to roll that out as we come out of lockdown. And then again, as I believe you referred to earlier, additional police digital investigators, taking our number to 22 once you include supervision, so that in the background we've got the right people with the right skills dealing with the huge increase in data that we've got and that we've got to deal with, so that our officers can do the frontline policing role that they are required to do. So collectively, that's a very welcome investment in visibility that we're able to make in this coming year on the back of the investments that we've made throughout the last 5 years. On top of that, I'll provide a brief summary of our plans with the National Uplift programme. The Constabulary is on track to implement its share of this very large national project of recruiting an extra 20,000 additional police officers. The Norfolk share of that 20,000 is allocated on a year-by-year basis. So I cannot at this stage give you a definitive figure as to what the Norfolk share would be, but it's strongly pointing towards just over 200 officers. But that will be confirmed on the year-by-year basis. Year one of the programme has been completed. We met the target set by the Home Office of recruiting an additional 67 police officers. We comfortably achieved that. And next year, as I just referred to, we're looking at an additional 90 police officers. And that is on top of normal recruitments to deal with natural wastage through retirements and leavers, etc. So that puts a significant strain on our learning and development department, which has made the investment in Heverset Old Hall School vital, so that we can ensure that the county does get that share of those officers and that they're trained to the standards that we need to make them fit for a long future of fighting crime across the constabulary. We continue to make careful evidence-based decisions as to where we're going to deploy the uplift officers. The report that you have seen highlights some of the areas where we've posted those officers to date. That includes additional detectives focused on serious and organised crime and targeting the county lines threat that you will be familiar with. And that, of course, has been boosted by the additional partnership funding that we've received through Operation Adder to target county lines criminality. We have increased the number of officers in detective roles, in safeguarding and investigations, and particularly in tackling growth crimes of child sexual abuse and rapes, so the most horrendous crimes that are committed in the county are receiving a significant portion of those additional officers. We've increased supervision in the form of 21 extra sergeants' posts. I think it's fair to say that when money was tight in years gone past, it was supervision that sometimes got trimmed. With the complexity of policing now and that young workforce that we were referring to earlier, supervision has never been more important. So we are making some reinvestments in supervision. And finally, I would just flag up that we are creating, we've created the additional Operation Moonshot team, which builds on the back of the 2 teams that we had in place, who already have been responsible for literally thousands of arrests, over £1 million worth of property recovered. We are expanding their capacity so that they can carry out more proactive visible policing, targeting the criminals that seek to do our communities harm. So in summary, both through increases in precept over the last few years and now the Uplift programme, we are now seeing a welcome increase in the visibility of policing across the county and an improvement in the service we can offer, and frankly also making the community a more difficult place for criminals to operate.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the dedication of these additional resources to issues such as digital investigations. That is a backroom function, isn't it, in a way, dealing with technology and so on. And you mentioned the dedication of additional officers to addressing rape and sexual violence cases. You mentioned enhancement of staff in the control room and taking calls. We're going to see a lot of these police officers out on the beat as well, these additional police officers. Are you going to see them in Downham and Swaffham and right across the county?
You will, Commissioner. I'd make a few points on the back of those observations. Firstly, our officers to whom we deploy into visible policing roles can only be visible if the back office is being taken care of. So much of this investment enables the visibility of the officers that we have already got. The reality of the crime that we are recording now is that the vast majority of it, and growing all the time, is crime that's not solved or prevented through visible policing alone. And it's the more careful, complex investigation that often happens behind closed doors, dealing with the most sensitive and private of crimes that requires that detective response. However, years 2 and 3 of the uplift increase will I anticipate swing much more towards visible policing and to uniform-based roles. But given the growing pressures and demands and the changing crime profile that we've experienced over the last few years, it's been absolutely essential that we make the investments that I outlined in the report, acknowledging that not all of them are what you would call visible policing roles.
Okay, there is a new enhanced education qualification coming on stream, isn't there, for police officers? Do I understand that implies that over a 3-year training program, you will have police officers from time to time sitting in classrooms, really, and not out on the beat. How are you going to cope with that? Are you going to have to take officers off the street to sit in classrooms?
So, Commissioner, you're correct. The new police education and qualification framework commences in January 2022. That will see 2 entry routes into policing, one which will see a 3-year trainee period and one which will see a 2-year training period. The 2-year will be for people who enter the service with a degree already. The 3-year will be an apprenticeship route where at the end of it, the trainee will receive a degree commensurate with the amount of training that they have to undertake. The PEQF aims to professionalise the training of police officers so that they are fit to deal and fit to be able to cope with what is an increasingly complex role. And yes, that does mean that officers will be spending more time in training and in classrooms learning the craft that is required. Through some very careful modelling, we've managed to significantly reduce down that abstraction impact from the estimates that we had first anticipated. But nonetheless, we will be deploying extra police officers on the streets so that the abstraction is not felt by the public throughout that 3-year period. The end result of this, I hope, is police officers who have a better training package and a better set of skills so that they can deal with the challenges we face in the future.
So it will not be the expense of frontline policing?
The additional training that they undertake will mean that they have less days on the beat, but we will be backfilling behind them to mitigate the impact of that. Okay,
thank you. And you're introducing, or have introduced a new bit of kit, haven't you, called Optic? which, as I understand it, will enable or is enabling police officers to more quickly move from one incident to another, and that effectively is increasing visibility because they're able to attend more jobs more often on a shift. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's in line with your priority around 21st century tools for police officers to do their job. Optic is a software platform that enables the police officer to connect to the systems that they can only currently connect to back at the police station. So we hope that the outcome of that will be more visible time spent on patrol, less time in the station. There will also be some back office savings associated with that as well, because there'll be reductions in double keying for some of our administrative departments. Rollout is ongoing. The feedback from users so far is very positive, and we think it will make a really big difference to our offering.
What are you doing with this uplift, not just the uplift program, but the increase in police numbers? What are you doing to ensure that the intake reflects the diversity of the Norfolk community?
Commissioner, we're undertaking a considerable amount of work in this area. I would say that it's a real challenge for us. So if I unpack it in terms of gender, I was delighted yesterday to meet our new intake of officers. 16 of the 24 were female, and we actually did a photo shoot, because yesterday was International Women's Day. We did a photo shoot to mark that occasion and show the changing face of the constabulary. However, it's still the case that we're recruiting roughly 35% females, 65% males at the moment, so we're aspiring to increase that.
Do I understand Norfolk? Sorry to interrupt you. I understand Norfolk demographically is 50.9% female. That's correct. So we still have a big jump to go. We've made some giant strides, but we've still got some further way to go. And in a moment, I'll touch upon some of our activity. We have a similar challenge when it comes to ethnicity of officers, particularly Black officers and Asian officers, where we are currently recruiting equivalent to 2011 census levels, but we anticipate that the 2021 census will record an even higher representation of minority groups within the county, and it will take many years before we achieve the level of representation that would be required, particularly for Black and Asian officers. So to try and combat that, I chair an uplift board myself personally every month, where our representation figures are discussed and our HR department held to account for their performance. We have a standalone diversity, equality and inclusion action plan, which is based upon the National Police Chiefs Council action plan that we are making good progress on. We've appointed a positive action coordinator whose full-time role, supported by officers from both EMPA, so the Ethnic Minority Police Association, and the Forum, are going out virtually, sadly at the moment, but going out to schools, to colleges, to employment fairs, to try and sell a career in policing. We've put together a bespoke marketing campaign to target both ethnic minority and female new recruits, and are branding most of our publicity around these areas. When it comes to ethnic minority groups, I would say that this is incredibly difficult in Norfolk. Our minority communities are very spread out around the county. There is no one community where I could walk and go and engage with a particular ethnic group, and our ability to recruit some of the new arrivals into the county is limited by vetting rules
set by the Home Office, which mean that any potential applicant has to be a continual resident in the county for a period of time before we could recruit them. So a considerable amount of work underway. It is really important to us, but also very challenging, and not helped by the knock in confidence that the Deaf in America last year of George Floyd had in policing. Events like that, every time that occurs, makes our task of drawing more people from ethnic minority groups into the service much, much harder.
Sounds like you need some more help from the Home Office too, do you?
There's certainly a couple of areas that they could look at. We are very limited in what we can do around positive action. So I have a good number of potential applicants in the waiting queue to join the constabulary, but I cannot bring them to the front of the queue under current guidance. And with the impact of COVID on jobs, there's some 800 people wanting to join the constabulary, and employment law would say I need to take them on a one-by-one basis in the order with which they applied.
Really?
And I also made reference to the limitations around vetting. So there are a couple of areas which I know National Police Chiefs Council have made clear to the Home Office, but it's certainly areas where we could have, where different options could be taken.
To quote Oprah Winfrey, wow. Lastly, specials and volunteers. I appreciate during the COVID period, it must be difficult to recruit specials. And I think we've always had a problem, haven't we, in holding on to specials because they're so dedicated, so like the job, they want to become regulars. Do you have plans afoot as things ease up to try to increase the number of specials? We did have a very good session with the rural community last night, and I like to say whenever I go around the rural community that if you really want your own police officer, you can have one. You can encourage someone on your farm to apply to become a special. You have your own dedicated police officer working for you. What are you doing? Do you have a plan going forward to increase the number of specials and volunteers?
We do, Commissioner. You're right. COVID did cause us to have to pause much of our recruitment activity. But the situation at present is that we currently have 182 specials, and pleasingly we have an additional 30 in training at present. We've now switched across to an online training for those specials. We also have in the region of 130 individuals who've expressed an interest in applying to be a special as well. So a big cohort of people wanting to join. So we took a bit of a dip because of COVID, but in the year ahead, we hope to see significant numbers coming to join us. And you are right about the retention issue. The Special Constabulary is often a gateway into being a regular, so we do see high turnover, but there's a lot of benefits to that as well. So I think we're in a good place.
And the new educational qualification coming down the road, does that have an implication for specials?
No, it doesn't change our ability to recruit specials. It will, of course, then affect them if they decide to join as a regular officer. But in terms of special recruitment, no.
So other specials, they have full powers, don't they, of warranted officers? But they won't. But going forward, they will not have the same educational qualification. You mentioned the professionalization of the force. They will not have the same professional qualification.
Correct, but we're very careful as to the situations into which we deploy special constables. We are looking at revising the curriculum for special constables training in any event. It will be it won't be close to PEQF, but we are making sure it's fit for the modern age.
Okay, thank you for that. We turn to the next agenda item, which is to prevent. Well, I'm not sure what the next agenda item is because on the stated agenda, it's called prevent offending, and on the supporting document, it's called to reduce offending. What is it?
Commissioner, I'll let our new bearded friend deal with that question.
to that substantive point, Commissioner, I suspect it's a typo, but it's reducing offending.
No, that's not a typo. A typo is if you misspell something, but there's a big difference between reducing and preventing, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Well, that's a very wise old saying, which I absolutely agree with. In essence, it's obviously our response in terms of your priority under the crime and policing plan, in terms of priority 4, which I believe is reduce offending. But the point is well made. What I'd like to do, Commissioner, under this agenda item, if that's okay, is to brief you, your team, and the public about what is hopefully quite an exciting development in terms of a new opportunity and service that will seek to both reduce offending, reoffending, and hopefully prevent offending in terms of issues in respect to domestic violence that we see in the county. So what I'd like to say is that we are on the cusp of introducing a new service, which is the Domestic Abuse Perpetrator Partnership Approach, DAPA for short. And that's in direct response to the domestic abuse that Norfolk's communities and individuals sadly have to endure. So in Norfolk, sadly, approximately 1 in 4 of the victim-based crimes recorded by Norfolk Constabulary are related to domestic abuse. Now, there is an existing response to domestic abuse within the county, be it from the frontline officer attending the calls for help and service via either 999 or the 101 route, attending, intervening, securing evidence, dealing with what they've got in front of them, and moving that on through to investigation, right through to the close partnership working that we have between all agencies, both statutory, third sector, which typically kind of are present in the multi-agency safeguarding hub, the MASH that we have here in Norfolk, Norfolk's MASH, which ensures, in essence, a multidisciplinary integrated approach to improving the safety and services to victims and children who are subject to and affected by domestic abuse.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Davison. One might also mention the very considerable resources in terms of manpower and in terms of taxpayers' money that is applied by my office, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk, because rehabilitation is also part of that journey.
I agree, and prior to this meeting, Commissioner, I was with Vicky Day on the Reducing Offending Board, and we were talking about some of the initiatives that are ongoing there across the agencies, including your office. So the Domestic Abuse Partnership Approach, DAPA, is a new initiative that seeks to build upon those existing arrangements that I've just described, but to provide a much needed additional service to try and tackle the perpetrator's behaviour specifically. So following work from your office, Commissioner, the national drive as well in terms of implementing early intervention pathways and actually a provision for perpetrators of domestic abuse. DAPA, as it's now become known, has in fact been recommended as a consequence of the work of your office in terms of research and evaluation. So we have tried to establish this programme actually earlier, but we were unsuccessful in a bid to the Home Office for the innovation funding. However, with your support at last month's precept decision, we now have funding for the next 2 years to introduce this new initiative and build upon that and evaluate its effectiveness. So in short, what DAPA will see is a dedicated team, a coordinator, caseworkers, an analyst that will establish itself within that multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is situated at Norfolk's County Council County Hall building. And that programme will concentrate on the development of the partnership approach in respect to perpetrators, forming a multi-agency delivery group to deliver that service and manage a group of perpetrators, and then obviously the actual provision of the targeted perpetrator intervention program itself, which is what DAPA is primarily there to deliver. So in terms of objectives for DAPA, so it is about reducing reoffending, it's about increasing behaviour changes through increased kind of support and service accessibility to perpetrators. It's about improving victim safety and that of the victim's family in terms of also securing better criminal justice outcomes and partnership working, and providing access to that intensive targeted perpetrator intervention programme. Though they're not necessarily reliant on criminal justice outcomes, but it's about trying to improve the behaviours and stop those domestic abuse perpetrator behaviours that lead to domestic abuse victims and victimisation. So clearly there will be a need to prioritise, given what I've said about the 1 in 4 state of domestic abuse volume within the county, and an operational delivery group will be established which will meet monthly, oversee those cases, and focus really on in the first instance as we seek to evaluate this new service and test it and make sure that it is going to deliver for us in terms of those positive outcomes that we hope, but identify, prioritise, responding to a cohort of domestic abuse perpetrators who present perhaps the most serious and repeat risk to harming victims, manage the actual perpetrator intervention plans and the associated actions, and that's about a plan that seeks to focus on addressing behaviours including substance misuse, mental health, housing, education, employment, and behavioural change programmes, to look at the perpetrator in their totality and try and understand why they behave the way that they do and address those behaviours to see those long-standing changes in terms of reducing therefore domestic abuse, and also as part of that to consider a range of law enforcement options that we've got to disrupt the perpetrator's behaviour, not least obviously the new legislation that we hope to see coming down the line with the orders later this year. So in terms of managing this new initiative, so governance and oversight will come from a strategic steering group. Progress will be reported back to a number of the county's existing boards and partnerships, including the Community Safety Partnership, which your office oversees, Commissioner, the Criminal Justice Boards, and also the Reducing Reoffending Board that, again, your office leads on in terms of Vicky Day's chairing of that group. Evaluation will be inbuilt into the programme. We'll work with the Constabulary Strategic Analysis Team and the Domestic Abuse Research Network from Suffolk University to obviously make sure that we evaluate the success, be able to ensure that it is going to deliver the outcomes and the objectives that we want it to, and then obviously use that in terms of what can we do then to actually see if this is a programme that has worked, is delivering those positive outcomes, and therefore we need to try and establish a way of sustaining it beyond the 2 years funding. So there's an overview really of that that new programme, Commissioner. Hopefully I've given sufficient details to be able to get a sense of what we're trying to address and how we're going to do that, and I commend it as an exciting development for Norfolk.
Well, congratulations for that. I haven't had much occasion to meet prosecuted domestic abusers, but I have met a few in Norwich Prison in years past. I never met one that considered himself guilty. She hit me first. I've heard that more than once. And presumably, if you want to stop smoking, if you want to stop abusing drugs, if you want to stop beating up on your partner, you've got to acknowledge that there's something lacking in your own behavior. So how do you ensure that the participants in these programs are not just using this as a get out of jail free card effectively? That they must acknowledge first, that they genuinely acknowledge that they need help.
So I think there's always a danger of that whenever you're dealing with human beings, Commissioner. I just think that's the nature of us as a species, really. But the programme itself will have an assessment framework. We'll have the right individuals in terms of the skill sets and assessments. We'll have reached back to the probation service as part of the partnership arrangement and all of their work that they do with offenders and perpetrators to be able to identify those individuals that, as I say, we consider cause the most harm, and therefore we would seek to target in terms of exposing them to this intervention programme, but also make sure that we really have a good understanding of their motivations for doing so, and engage them in a way that if it becomes apparent that actually it's not being engaged with properly by them, that we'll have an exit pathway, that we'll be able to perhaps bring different tactics to bear, that perhaps start to look at the law enforcement options that we've got to deliver a degree of change in behaviours through compellability, or quite frankly, if it's clear that they're not going to benefit from the programme, then they'll be released from the programme, and then other law enforcement options and tactics can be brought to bear that are not about changing their behaviours, because they're not ready to change their behaviours, in which case we just need to deal with them in terms of offenders and ensure that the full force of the law is brought against them.
And what part does the victim or people close to the victim, such as children, play in this?
So, I mean, I don't have the devil in the detail about how the behavioural change programme will work in its actual day-to-day activity, but certainly I can imagine that as we work with individuals, you have to build a picture about who they are, what's going on in their lives, and I alluded to that in terms of substance misuse, mental health, housing, education, support, employment, etc. And you need to build up a picture, and part of that will obviously be working with the victims, particularly if they're in an ongoing relationship with the perpetrator, to understand that, and therefore allow the victim to perhaps give some insight into things which will help shape that behavioural change programme for that individual perpetrator. So I think what we'll see is a collection of professions coming together in a much stronger and much more coordinated way, having a really good case-by-case intensive understanding about the individual in front of them, to then be able to develop a plan that is specific to that individual, to look to encourage and support them to change their behaviours for a whole range of interventions. And part of that will absolutely, I'm sure, where relevant, in terms of an ongoing relationship, involve listening to the victims and thinking about what's needed from their perspective to be able to achieve that.
Thank you. I think there is, I'm not an expert in this area, but I have read a bit into it, and I think there's some evidence in the United States that a whole family approach, if you want to speak of family writ large, is absolutely essential to this, that you have a perpetrator, you have a victim, and not just one victim, but the surrounding family as well. And that unless or until all of them are party to this, that the chances of success are not great. But again, it's not for me. I'm not an expert in this area. So, but congratulations on doing this and working closely in partnership. Obviously, a partnership approach is important. And my office has been working very hard, and we have some expertise in my office, not at my desk, but in my office, that can play an important part in helping you with this program. Since we're talking about either reducing or preventing offending, Chief, the issue arose last night. I'm not talking about reducing, I'm talking about preventing. How do we prevent the theft of dogs? Prevent.
Commissioner, so the time we spent talking about dog thefts last night was helpful from my perspective, because we need to place some context in this, and you're aware of this. So in 2020 we had 30 reports of dogs being stolen, and we'd had 32 in 2019, and encouragingly, of the total number of dogs that were stolen in 2020, which was 52, 31% were recovered and returned to their owners. So I hope we can allay some of the concerns that are in the community, being driven by and large by social media. What I would say is that analysis of the theft of pets is very clear. Dogs are being stolen from kennels, from houses during burglaries, and from back gardens. They are not being stolen as people drive by. So all these stories of men in white vans lifting dogs off a street or when they're out for a walk is just, it's misleading. And I hope last night we were able to put that to rest. The key thing is to have the right security in place, and if dogs are in kennels, to make sure that they are locked away and they are in very, very strong, secure accommodation. The use of alarms and CCTV is incredibly useful, making sure that gardens are well secured. Owners not leaving your dogs out in the garden, making sure your dogs are chipped and neutered, because that's where a real value in a dog is. Any suspicious activity, dial 101. And again, I think it was Angela last night who was on the rural crimes call, asked specifically that question. So I hope not only were we able to give some solid crime prevention advice, but we'd also provide some real reassurance around the rare occasions this takes place, and it is very rare. It's less than one a week, thankfully, but when it does take place, it hurts, and we just need to understand that, get that message out. So much of this has been driven by activity on social media, and actually there is a reality as to what's taking place in the county, and thankfully these crimes are rare indeed.
As rare as it is, we're all vulnerable, aren't we, to being attacked by criminals, whether it's online fraud, whether it's the theft of dogs and so on. Do you have a secure garden?
Do I? No, I don't have a particularly secure garden, no.
Okay. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is emergency services collaboration. Who's going to speak to that?
Chief, I'll deal with that item. So the collaboration continues. I think we would all recognise that it hasn't moved as quickly as we would like it have done. I will watch with great interest the impending announcement, I believe it is, around the future of governance of fire and rescue services and the roles of commissioners. We'll see what happens there, but I would make the following observation. There is no doubt in my mind that over the next period of the comprehensive spending review, so starting in 2022, funding is going to become incredibly difficult for everybody in the public sector. I don't think there can be any question about that whatsoever. And we, as public servants, have a responsibility to ensure that public funds are used efficiently and effectively. There are some significant opportunities for at least £1 million+ to be saved through better collaboration between Norfolk Constabulary and Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. And I think we have a duty to exploit that opportunity and to save money, and at the same time, probably, if I'm being honest, to improve the quality of service that people that are calling either Constabulary or the Fire and Rescue Service currently get. That has got to be an ambition, and I hope that that your successor looks at that. I'm not sure what the government's position is going to be on the mandation, but I think we have a responsibility to exploit those opportunities, because when financially it's going to be difficult, there is an obvious point there where significant sums can be saved.
You will know that I invested £100,000 of taxpayers' money to see whether that was an invest to save, to see whether we could save substantial money and save lives through more efficient, effective, not just budgets, but safety in the county. And that study showed conclusively to most people, including a majority of the Norfolk community that was consulted on that we could keep the county safer, we could provide faster, more efficient service, and more assured funding going forward, and investment for the fire service. But for reasons that will be well known by some, the kibosh was put on that. And if I were seeking re-election, and I don't believe in hands reaching from the grave, but if I was seeking re-election, I would return to that. I would update that business case, because it demonstrated that we could save gross £11 million of Norfolk taxpayers' money over 10 years. 10 million net. That's $1 million, not just $1 million that you mentioned, but $1 million a year, year on year on year. Since I was frustrated, largely for political reasons, I think, in that effort to save that money and keep this county safer, there has been at least one national inspection of the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service, which showed that it needed improvement in significant areas. And I know work is undergone to do that. But I think it was a missed opportunity, and I will always regret the fact that I was denied the opportunity effectively, because for me to challenge the opposition would have required, and threats of court cases would have required me to spend even more of the taxpayers' money and using up valuable resources in my office over extended periods to fight the side. So we'll see what comes up in the next week or two in terms of mandation of this. I think it will be, if it does happen, it will be to the great benefit of the Norfolk community in terms of their money and in terms of keeping them safer. And I think there's a lot to be learned about efficiency from the Norfolk Constabulary. And I hope the County Council will heed that and pay careful attention to the opportunities for, not for themselves, but for this county in terms of safety and best use of taxpayers' money. There, I put it in my pipe and I smoked it. The next agenda item is any emerging operational and organizational risks.
Commissioner, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. We're still managing the pandemic, the challenges of that. The challenge for the constabulary over the coming months will undoubtedly be overseeing and being supportive of that smooth transition back to normality in June. So that is a focus for us, and of course also preparing for a number of big events. We've got some huge events this summer, nationally, locally, all of which are going to, and internationally, of course, all of which are going to place a strain on policing, and the constabulary will undoubtedly be challenged with that. And I am anticipating, and I can't predict the weather, a very, very busy summer in terms of staycations and visitors. So whilst not an operational risk, it's going to be an operational challenge. There's no doubt about that. So that is at the forefront of our mind at this moment in time. Organisational risks. I think from an organisational perspective, our focus now is on how we start to prepare for the medium-term financial plan, a spending review, which I think is going to be incredibly challenging. Paul and Peter have done a fabulous job this year, but I don't doubt that next year it's going to be tougher. So we've got to start thinking about what that looks like, and I think it's absolutely fair to say that our room for manoeuvre is greatly reduced. We have saved, it's got to be towards £40 million now over the course of the last decade plus. There is little wriggle room, and complexity of crime and the type of crime that we're now having to deal with, unfortunately, come with significant price tags attached. So we're going to have to start putting our hearts and minds to what the future looks like as an organisation, and I suspect policing on a further reduced budget.
Okay, thank you. I subscribe to all that as well. Last agenda item is any other business. Anything anyone wants to raise?
I've just got one, Commissioner. I think I'm right in saying that this is your last public accountability forum.
Yes.
So it would be remiss of me not to make one or two observations, if you don't mind. Commissioner, I, over the course of the last 5 years, have worked with you to further improve upon policing in the county, and that relationship has been based upon one of mutual trust and respect, but it's been absolutely based upon a clear understanding of the policing protocol and the understanding of our respective roles and responsibilities. And I am grateful for the way that you have approached your role as a police and crime commissioner, and for the way that you have respected our respective roles, our respective responsibilities. And on occasions, you've taken some bullets on my behalf. So the decision around the future of police community support officers was absolutely my decision, but you took the bullets on my behalf. And both privately and publicly, you have been a great supporter of the men and women of this organisation, and I'm grateful for the support that you've provided. I think it's fair to say that we haven't always agreed, but our disputes have been in private rather than public, and that's exactly the way that it should be done. You have supported the constabulary financially every year based upon a keen awareness and understanding of the challenges that I face, and a real challenge to me in terms of the reasons for seeking a increase in the precept. And again, we've had some interesting conversations around the necessity for increasing precept, but you've always listened, you've challenged appropriately, and I'm grateful for the support that you have provided financially through the increase in precept during your tenure. I think, and I know you don't like the use of the word legacy, but you can leave the Constabulary Commissioner and reflect on what I believe to be 5 very successful years. The Constabulary is now stronger, it's more efficient, and it's more effective than it was when you came into office, and that's perhaps the greatest compliment I can pay you. You leave an organisation that is now using 21st century technology for 21st century policing challenges. You leave an organisation which now has the greatest number of police officers it's ever had. You leave us in a strong financial position with an estate that most chief constables would give their eye teeth for, and an organisation that is delivering the type of levels of confidence and the type of policing that our communities respect and appreciate. So thank you. I've enjoyed working with you for the last 5 years, and you should be really very, very proud of what you've achieved as your time as the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Well, thank you, Simon. I just have 3 words really, which I hope I will be remembered by, and that is to protect the protectors. Because without the force that you've led and an inspirational leadership, and the risk here now is that we're just trading compliments. But I came in at a time of a great transformation in the force. You had your 2020 model that you were implementing, and that was challenging and that was brave of you. And it wasn't all you, but you gave the inspirational leadership, but you were backed up by a fantastic team, some of whom are on this call today. And what I've sought to do is support what you're doing. Now, some people say, well, there needs to be a creative tension between the role of Police and Crime Commissioner and Chief Constable. And we've had that, but it's always, in my view, it's always been a constructive one, because through tension, you test the strength of things. And what I've found is we have a constabulary that is second to none in this country, with men and women, both officers and staff, of which you've given inspired leadership. They have gone on the journey with you through, which has not always been easy for them, through change. And I sought to support that by trying to get you the processes and the equipment that you need and the facilities that you need. But at the end of the day, law and order is nothing without those who are dedicated to protecting us. And that is you and the men and women who serve you. So I will always, to my dying day, I will argue for maximum effort to protect the protectors, whether it has to do immediately with the vaccine, whether it has to do with a police covenant. I hope that might be mentioned today. I gather the police bill is going to be presented in Parliament today. Whether it's got to do with appropriate sentencing for those who seek to violate and attack and assault our protectors. So thank you. Have I enjoyed the last 5 years? I've found it really fulfilling. I'll put it that way. It hasn't always been easy, but my other mantra, which I've seen in spades in the Norfolk Constabulary, is service above self. I think that should be the motto of the Norfolk Constabulary, because that's what I've seen uniformly over 5 years. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
The next meeting of this forum with the new commissioner will be on Wednesday, the 23rd of June. I'll be in my garden. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you, Commissioner.